Kaitlin was almost 4, about 3.5. I had Allie, her sister. When she was, I guess it was that Christmas before, when she was about 2.5, she jumps in Santa's lap, and Santa asked what she wanted for Christmas, and she said a baby sister. So the next year, she got one, and Allie and her were best friends.
Look, there's a beautiful picture here of her holding Allie. So let's talk about how she came to have the Gardasil vaccine.
At her 11-year-old checkup, for her physical for basketball, the pediatrician pushed me and said, wouldn't you like her to have the Gardasil shot? And I said, I don't know. Is it mandatory? Is it something that she has to have? I just felt like she'd already been vaccinated to what she needed for school standards. And I really didn't know that I wanted to really do that.
Why? So she was a big athlete. We've got pictures here of her. She's in the school teams.
6'1".
And why is the Gardasil needed for sport? Why were they doing that?
It's not needed. I denied it the first time. She went back maybe 3 months later for a sick visit, and they pushed it on me at a sick visit.
Do you remember what she was sick for when you went in?
Just regular cold symptoms, runny nose, little congestion, not really much of anything. And the pediatrician did her hardcore press with me and said, do you want your daughter to get cervical cancer? And I had a friend of mine whose mother, the year previous, had gotten cervical cancer and died. And it was too late when they found it to do anything about it. So I guess that rang in my mind, and she pushed my buttons just enough, trying to make me feel like a bad mother if I didn't give Kaitlin the shot. Do you want your daughter to get cervical cancer? Who wants their child to get cancer? I really wasn't educated about Gardasil at the time, so I allowed the vaccination. The biggest mistake of my life.
So describe what happened after the first vaccine.
After the first vaccination, Kaitlin did show a little symptoms of, we thought she had appendicitis or a ruptured appendix. Actually had to go to the ER and have some imaging done of her area to make sure that she wasn't, having those kinds of issues. And they didn't find anything. It was inconclusive. So a few days later, she went back to playing basketball, and she was fine for a while.
And how long after did she have her second Gardasil?
She had the second shot 11 months later. You're supposed to have them closer together, but she was never sick. She was always healthy. So we weren't at the pediatrician's office until time to do another, a healthy check visit so you could get your physical for sports. And that's when she got the second shot.
All right, and so how did she feel after the second shot?
She was a little dizzy, but we passed it off as just being overexerted because she had a personal trainer that she worked out with for basketball other than just being on a team. She worked out up 6 or 7 days a week for basketball. She wanted to play college ball. So we just brushed it off as maybe just fatigue.
Did you see a doctor about the dizziness? Or?
No.
I'm asking because of all the stories that we talk about the Gardasil. Dizziness is the #1 complaint after leg pain. So
leg pain was excruciating. She became symptomatic maybe 6 months later. Her first major symptom was excruciating head pain, like the worst migraine you could ever have times 10. It was so bad that I'm not a dramatic person. We usually, if it's a cold, we do sinus rinses and wait for it usually 10 days and it gets better. We don't really do a lot of antibiotics in our house. So it was really bad. She was crying, and this is a kid that rough and tough, plays aggressive ball down low where you bruise people up and they bruise you. So if she's crying, there's really something wrong. So we go to the ER. And
how old is she at this point?
At this point, The first symptom she had was May 31st, 2012. So the first symptom she had, she was 14. The major symptom, she was 14. It was unbearable. She became light sensitive. She became sound sensitive. She had to be in a dark room just for the fact that her pain was that excruciating. Doctors couldn't find anything wrong with her. They weren't looking at the right things. They weren't pulling the right tests. They weren't looking for the right answers, because we were hospitalized from her first symptom in May 31st of 2012 until that Thanksgiving. We were hospitalized 3 separate occasions for a total of 32 days. In those 32 days, we had MRIs, we had...
Just after the second one or the third one?
The second or the third?
But a Gardasil vaccine?
Second shot.
So
she never had the third.
She never had the third. This is just only after 2?
2 shots.
Okay.
Yeah. She was hospitalized. The doctor asked me, had she been vaccinated recently? And my answer, by the time we were there, the first hospital visit, it had been 10 or 11 months. And he said, well, then this couldn't be vaccine related, the neurologist. So
did you bring up that you thought it may be?
At that point, I had no idea what was wrong with my daughter. I really had no idea what was wrong with Kaitlin. Not being in the medical profession, I'm an event planner, I had no idea what was wrong with my daughter, and I was desperately seeking answers. I was so scared, and she was scared, just desperately seeking answers. And they had no answers for me. One of the best children's hospitals in the Southeast, they had no idea what was wrong with my child.
So while you were in hospital for that time, what were they doing? Just performing a lot of tests?
Giving her heavy-duty, like IV narcotics to try to get the pain under control. And, at a certain point, this is the hardest part, 'cause they thought it was in her head. They thought it was psychological because she was a teenager. And by the third visit, they really had stopped listening to us. And I said, this is a varsity athlete that is so loved at home. She's had no life changes. No one in her family has passed away. She's not having any issues with her friends. She's a well-respected athlete that people really like. And she gets attention at home and on the court. I said, she's not attention-seeking. Because they said, teenagers can be attention-seeking. And we went through that for about 5 or 6 days. They wanted to put her on antidepressants. I finally said, okay, you think this is psychological, and it's not. And I knew we would not move past this point to get a diagnosis. So I said, please have psychology send somebody out here from that unit, and I want her evaluated. Because I know this is not what it is. But to get you to move forward, we're going to have to do this. And Kaitlin didn't want to do it. Because she thought they were saying she was crazy. That all these pains were not real. And that she really wasn't sick. And that was a really tough time for her. So terrible. Sorry. At that point, the GI doctor, by the third hospitalization in November, it had gotten so bad she started cycle vomiting. And she couldn't keep any food down. And I was getting scared. So she had to have a NG tube placed so that she could have nutrition. That lasted, I started seeing a chiropractor. He works with athletes, and he thought maybe it had been concussion related. So he put her in a hyperbaric chamber, and she started getting hyperbaric therapy and with microcurrent and chiropractic. And she started to get a little better for a little while with the cycle vomiting. Pain was still very real. Cycle vomiting, he got it under control for 2 weeks, and she was able to eat for 2 weeks. And then she was never able to eat again. The NG tube wouldn't work, and we had to be put on a port for nutrition, which she was on for 3 years.
3 years?
The child never ate a meal for 3 years. And if that wasn't bad enough, if she hadn't suffered enough pain, and she had this excruciating long bone pain in her legs, and we would have to ice her legs down to give her relief. And she was miserable. She was just miserable. And she would say to me, she'd say, I want to go home. And she would be in this house, and she would say, I want to go home. And she was talking about to be with the Lord because she was just in so much pain. This is early on. This child went through this for 3.5 long years. She suffered. She started having seizures. We finally found a doctor who was willing to look outside the box. And she's here in this area. Her name's Dr. Ellie Campbell. And she decided that she had autoimmune encephalitis that might have been driven from vaccine injury. So there was a brand new test. Still didn't really know what was wrong with my child, that this was Gardasil injury. We're just trying to get a diagnosis for some kind of treatment and help. And there was a seminar she just went to with a doctor who was involved with the National Institute of Health. She pioneered a new test for autoimmune, being able to find it in children. And it was called the Cunningham Panel. And Kaitlin had that test done. It took over a month to get the results back. But December of 2014, Dr. Campbell called me, and you would have thought she won the lottery. She had a diagnosis, a partial diagnosis for my child, that she had autoimmune encephalitis, which is a brain infection, which was causing and triggering the seizures, which she believed came from the magic, as she called it, the magic smoking bullet, the Gardasil shot. Kaitlin's seizures never went away. She endured them, and they were miserable. They came on the same time every day, and they would go into the wee hours of the morning. And I didn't leave this house hardly ever. Somebody always had to be with her. I worked from home, and I was her nurse, and I was her mom. She was miserable. She would have seizures and she would cry. It was so painful. It would shake her whole body and her head that already hurts. And it made everything 10 times worse. It was just so miserable for her. And I had to sit with her because she had had during this time period, she gotten a huge pulmonary embolism. So she had to be on blood thinners, probably for the rest of her life if she would have lived. And with seizures, you can hit your head, and she's on blood thinners, so she had to be monitored all the time. The life that she lived for the last 3.5 years was misery. And then she died on January 12th of this year. After all the struggles and fights, and we thought she was finally getting a little better. She went to sleep. She wasn't feeling good during the day. And I went in to check on her. And she looked like she was very still. She was in her bed. And she had passed away. And I tried to revive her, but she was gone. And there was nothing at that point I could do. That one decision I made. I don't have my daughter doesn't have a sister anymore. That is the only peace that I have, is that child doesn't have to suffer anymore. And that she can walk, and that she has no pain, and that she's happy. Because the last 4 years of her life were terrible.
She was beautiful, beautiful girl.
She was full of life, full of everybody that knew her. She just had a light about her. There was something special about Kaitlin. She loved everybody. She loved special needs kids, I think. Maybe if she'd had the chance to grow up, she probably would have been a special needs teacher or someone who worked with special needs kids. She was a peer mentor for them.
She was just a good kid. While other kids were trying drugs and alcohol, my child just wanted to play basketball. She was just a good kid, and her mom made a bad choice.
No, you didn't. We trusted. Everybody trusted. We trusted, and we were lied to.
Oh God, we were lied to.
And this is why it's going to stop.
Cervical cancer in America, after researching it and finding out what was wrong with Kaitlin, I have a better chance of probably winning the lottery. And that shot only works on 4 of probably 50 or 60 strains of it. If she would have gotten HPV, she would have been better off having a pap smear yearly. And she would have been better off because she wouldn't be dead.
What did they put down as her cause of death?
Her doctor put down Gardasil related.
And has this been filed? Is it?
Yes. It's on her death certificate.
That's powerful.